It's the first two-parter of Series 2, Rise of the Cybermen and Age of Steel. And since Russell T Davies struck gold with the Daleks' return to the show, it only makes sense to bring back another classic villain. And what better villain to bring back than the Cybermen? Now, I remember as a child loving this two-parter when it first came out, so much that whenever people complained about it and saying it was bad, I was like, "You shut up! This story is awesome and the Cybermen are cool!" But then, watching it over and over again, and after seeing other Cybermen stories and having a couple of thoughts going on, there were moments where I was watching this thinking, yeah. The story starts off with the Doctor happily travelling in the TARDIS with Rose Tyler and Mickey Smith, when the vortex suddenly just disappears. We don't actually get an explanation of how, but it just does. Anyway, they plunge into a present-day Earth of a parallel universe, which has still living relatives of Rose and Mickey, as well as a different communication software known as Cypress Industries. However, the owner of the company, John Lumick, played by the late Roger Lloyd Pack, has other plans for England, so he has been kidnapping people to be given a new upgrade of moving the brain and putting it into a suit of armor, thus making the modern era version of the Cybermen. It might be a little cliche of saying this, but Rise of the Cybermen is more of a setup for the next episode, establishing the world building and the entire build-up to the Cybermen. So I'm going to start off by talking about the parallel world and how it affects our characters first, before we get to the Cybermen stuff. I don't think the show has actually tackled with alternate dimensions yet, from my knowledge. And this one is filled with what-if scenarios. What if Rose Tyler's dad was alive? What if he became a success? What if Britain had a president instead of a prime minister? What if Mickey was actually named Ricky? What if he was actually a tough guy? What if Rose was a dog? Okay, that one actually made me giggle. We do see how this world tempts Rose and Mickey, wanting to see if anything of their deceased relatives are still alive, and if it's possible that they could live among them. As the Doctor pointed out, it's like a gingerbread house. At first, I originally thought Rose had become more like a dim-witted idiot, since I would have thought she would have learned from previous occasions, like in Father's Day. But now I can fully see Rose's isolation and curiosity in the story. We see how Pete and Jackie Tyler's lifestyle is completely different from the actual real world. How Pete has not only become a businessman, but a political influencer, and Jackie has become a vain, pompous diva. It's a nice contrast to how the Tyler's lives from the Father's Day episode might have improved if Pete didn't die, but even if he did become a success, it still doesn't look like a happy life. And with Mickey, we see how his background is fully established. It's really clear this character has been ignored all through his life by the Doctor and Rose, and we now get to see his personal life explored a lot more, like the visit with his now living Nan, and you can see how torn up he is about it, how he's probably let his entire family and himself down and wanted to make amends for it. But at the same time, we do see the downsides to living in this world, how the rich society live up in the blimps over the city, whilst the working class or the average people are laid to rot on the surface. Stuff like a curfew taking place in Mickey's working class area, the human race having these earpieces to access downloads or information, and possibly the idea of using the earpieces to rig voting polls. We also see how this version of Mickey, now named Ricky, which, by the way, did the Doctor know about this when he was making fun of Mickey? Anyway, this version of Mickey shows how some people who do not agree with this new system would rather go out to bring the company down in desperate needs. You could probably even see subtle references to the classic story The Invasion. I'll even say the build-up to the creation of the Cybermen was handled well. Yes, it's obvious this is heavily referencing to Genesis of the Daleks. I mean, the creator is literally in a wheelchair, but I do like how certain items of this world could be fitted into a Cybermen story, like the mobile networks, communication systems, mental health, download softwares, all that stuff. And there are some small visual hints that I really do like the earpieces that shape into the Cybermen's handle-shaped head, whilst at the same time downloading its owner's mind. That was a creepy touch. So overall, Rise of the Cybermen sets up the world building and the reveal of the Cybermen pretty well for the most part. So it's obvious Age of Steel would focus more on the Cybermen side, so let's now talk about them here. I remember falling in love with these metal beings. These are literally one of my all-time favorite monsters of the show, and for the majority of it, The makers actually did a great job of establishing this interpretation of the Cybermen. From the design, the voices, the stomping, and the music, Murray Gold is just really great at creating new themes for characters. The stomping mixed with their theme really emphasizes the might and horror of this metal army. There was just something about the way these things looked that sort of got me transfixed with them. Maybe it's the stature, the teardrop eyes, or the fact that you cannot be able to read their expressions or their emotions. They are literally emotionless shells of human beings in metal bodies. One of the characters gets turned into a Cyberman, and there's a moment where they blend in with the other Cybermen, and you cannot tell which one is which. Other scenes we do get, like one of the other Cybermen gets their inhibitor chip damaged, and you discover that it's actually a woman about to be married. That's haunting to think about. It fully establishes that it doesn't matter what gender, race, sex, or nationality you are. When you become a Cyberman, you are all identical, with no personality or habits to make you stand out. But I will admit, looking back, there are times where they just look like people in costumes, and yeah, other fans have pointed out how they seem to have lost the human features, making them stomp like robots rather than walk like humans. And yeah, some of the dated special effects like the Cybermen factory do sometimes let the story down. But when you've got a great director like Graham Harper shooting this script, and a terrific sound team to make this monstrosity sound heavy and metal, you can at least admire the ambition given to this production. The only thing that brings these Cybermen down is the motivation of John Lumick. Why does he want to convert the human race? Now, I get that he's a dying man. He wants to upgrade himself to feel no pain and never die. That's a good goal. It's a good throwback to the Cybermen's original plan to survive in their first story, The 10th Planet. And I buy that he uses homeless people to be test subjects. That makes sense. So why didn't he just convert himself afterwards, only to then get the cyber part of the conversion take over his mind to convert everyone else? But I guess the slight problem with this two-parter is the writing. Now, the writing for the most part is solid enough, despite a few repeats of Father's Day, but when it comes to Age of Steel, it does feel like small parts already established in Rise of the Cybermen get ignored, flipped over, or just wiped away. Certain things only happening for no reason other than to kill off a character, or for a big red button climax to happen. Even when the Doctor interrogates with the cyber controller version of Lumick, I don't know, it just feels like there was something missing there. It literally just felt like the writer Tom McRae was making the rest of the story up as he went along. However, where the writing does work is with the character of Mickey. This is Noel Clarke's moment to shine. You can see that this underrated, ignored character has fully become his own strong man. In fact, having a mature version of himself with Mickey adds to it. By the way, Noel Clarke plays both versions really well. The scene where Mickey sees the tough persona of himself get killed off by the Cybermen, realizing that even if he does put on this tough guy persona, or even if he just stays the same, he could still get killed. So he has to go bold and confident to do something about it. So he stands up to the Doctor and decides to go and help one of the Snatchers take down the cybernetic transmission. We see him trick a Cyberman into killing itself, and we see him fly the blimp with a ladder to save the Doctor and Rose and Pete from an exploding factory. And once the day is saved, he decides to stay behind and stop the other Cybermen factories, as well as look after his now living Nan. He has truly outgrown Rose and has finally gone into his own. Even the Doctor is proud of him at that moment. Mickey the Idiot has become Mickey the Hero. So overall, Rise of the Cybermen and Age of Steel is a tricky one for me. On one hand, I really like it. I really do like it. The Cybermen look great, Graham Harper's ambitious and bold direction is awesome, and Mickey's story growth is easily the highlight of the story. But when I start to think about the logic behind the story, like John Lumick's plan and parts of the world building, my love for the story actually decreases. So I guess it depends on the eye of the beholder. Rise of the Cybermen works as a decent setup for the characters in Parallel World, whilst Age of Steel is an action-packed Cybermen thrill run, but with pieces missing. But say what you will about the story, there is no doubt that the Cybermen have now officially arrived in the 21st century, and it is excellent.